This is McFly Angler.
Starts now.
To start, we will need a long shank jig hook like these firehole sticks number 523 in size 8. We will also need a slotted tungsten bead, and I really like these almond joy colored ones in size 4.0 millimeter. The easiest way to put the bead on your hook is to put the bead in your hand and bring the hook to the bead like so. Now put the hook securely in your vise. When using slotted beads on jig hooks, remember there is a correct way to seat these beads. If turned upside down, the bead won't seat properly, so make sure it's seated the right way. For thread, I'm using Viva's 6/0 in brown. Start your thread right at the bead, and then snip or snap off the waist. Then build a thread dam behind the bead to make sure it doesn't slip down. Now bring your thread down into the bend of the hook, and then back up to the start of the bend. We will need some crystal flash in gold, and I really like this mid-size flash, but the regular crystal flash will work also. Snip off one piece and fold it in half. Measure the crystal flash to extend about 2 hook shank lengths off the back of the bend of the hook. Tie it in with a couple tight wraps and then snip off the waist. Now tie it down into the bend so it angles downward, but don't go too far. That there is about right. Build a small thread bump here to splay the legs out a bit. Then bring your thread up to about the hook point mark. Now we need some nymph size silly legs. These from Wapsi in the orange barred color work great. Break off one strand and then cut it in half. This will make 2 flies. Take one of the strands and tie it in right at the center of the leg. Then split the legs to tie them in on either side of the hook up to the thread bump so they splay outward a little like this. Now we need some orange flashy dubbing, and I like this UV2 Diamond Bright in the rust orange color. Pull out just a little bit of this. Dub it onto your thread, then make a small dubbing bump right behind the legs like so. Now we need some Chickaboo. I really like this barred Chickaboo from Whiting in the brown color. Pull off 2 Chickaboo feathers and then prepare them for tie-in by stripping off all the fuzzies at the base of the feather. I also find wetting the feather before tie-in helps make the tie-in easier. Measure out about a hook shank length for the feather and then tie it in at the rear of the fly, angling downward slightly. The dubbing ball will help to splay this outward and look more like a crayfish claw. Turn the fly over and repeat with the other feather, ensuring that it reaches back to the same length as the other feather. Cut off the waist part of the feathers and then tie up on top of the feathers slightly so they are both even. Turn the fly around once more and advance your thread about halfway up the hook shank. Now we need something called Swiss straw. Pull off a piece about this long, which should tie about 3 to 4 of these flies. Tie it in on the underside of the hook, which will actually be on top of the fly, and pull it back slightly to remove some bulk at the front of the hook. Then tie back up until you reach the feather claws. And turn your fly over once again. Now we need some soft hackle, and these Brahma soft hackle with Chickaboo pelts from Whiting are perfect. The feathers are slightly mottled, which gives a nice look to this fly. By the way, you could also use the Chickaboo on this patch for the claws as well. However, I like the barred aspect of the grizzly Chickaboo in the previous patch. Anyway, pull off 2 feathers and then remove the fuzzies at the base of the feather. Then pinch just the tip of the feather and stroke down the remaining fibers so you're left with a small tie-in tag. Tie this tag in right at the start of the feather claws, and then advance your thread halfway up the hook shank. Grab some hackle pliers, and I really like this type. Then proceed to wrap the feather up the hook shank while stroking the feathers rearward with each wrap. Start wrapping with closer wraps at first. Then towards the end of the feather, proceed to make more open spiral wraps. Capture the feather when you run out of fibers. And if you do this just right, you can just break the feather stem off clean like so. Now prepare the second feather for tie-in in the same way. However, here we will not use the entire feather. Stroke back just the base part of the feather like so, maybe about 1 inch of usable fibers. Then snip off the tag end close so you're left with a small tie-in spot like this. Tie this feather in where the last feather ended, and then advance your thread to right behind the bead. Start making open spiral wraps up the hook shank like you did with the last feather. And make sure to stop right at the bead like so. Capture the feather stem and break or snip off the waist. Turn your fly over once more and then brush out the hackle. And split the hackle at the hook point with either the tip of your scissors or a bodkin. Now pull the Swiss straw up through the hackle, stroking the hackle fibers rearward as you do this. Try to ensure the straw is right at the top of the hook shank like so, and then tie it down with a couple tight wraps and trim off the waist. To make the head look more clean, I am going to use some dubbing, and I like this Antron dubbing in the chocolate color. Now we don't need much here. Dub this onto your thread, and then form a bit of a collar on the fly to hide any thread wraps. Now whip finish your fly and snip the thread loose. To cement the head of flies with dubbing near the whip finish, I like using this Loon water-based head cement. Just brush some onto the whip finish, and don't worry if it gets onto the dubbing like it did here. After a few minutes it soaks in, and will dry very clear. This was actually filmed over 6 minutes to show the speed at which it dries clear. Now for the final step. I like to separate the fibers at the base of the fly like so. Then I add a bit of the Solarez ultra thin UV resin at the base of the part I made with the feathers. Once you cure it with the UV light, the fibers should stay splayed out sideways like so. And there we have it, a micro crayfish I designed for fishing bass in rivers out here in South Texas. However, I've had many customers say this works great for trout and in lakes for bass and sunfish. This should excel anywhere fish are targeting small crayfish. The reason for this fly's success is how it sits on the bottom. The tungsten bead and jig hook combo means it will sink quickly, but when it's at the bottom, you can pull slightly on your fly line and it will pick the front part of the fly up to look like a crayfish in a defensive stance. So what do you all think of this fly? Leave your comments below to let me know. As you all know, I have gotten you all discounts from both www.risenfly.com and www.dooliesflyfishing.com. Doolies offers great prices on all of the name brand fly tying materials, and Risen Fly manufactures their own hooks, rods, reels, and other gear for fly fishing. Their products are top quality, and best of all, they are priced very reasonably. Not only are the prices at these two shops great, but like I said, they are offering all of my subscribers a discount. So use McFly at checkout when ordering from either of these shops, and you will get an additional 15% off of their already great prices. I want to also thank all of my Patreons who support me. For as little as $1 a month, you can help support this channel and also get some great perks like early access to my videos, participate in live streams, and more. So go to www.patreon.com/McFlyAngler to sign up today. I also thank all of you who share all my videos with your friends and your continued support by hitting the like buttons and subscribing. Thank you for making these videos possible. I will see you on the next video. Now you go catch some fish.